During Sunday brunch at my own kitchen table, my son slid a leather portfolio toward me and said, "Dad, we have something exciting to show you." Inside were closing documents transferring my lake house to his name, plus $580,000 in business loans, with my forged signature on every page. His wife added, sweet as pie, "The bank needs your cooperation by tomorrow morning." When I refused, my son grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises, and his wife slammed my hand in the cabinet drawer until I heard something snap. 2 hours later, federal agents knocked on my door. But the real reckoning, the one that would unravel every lie they'd built over 6 years, was just beginning. Before we go any further, please subscribe to Honey Revenge and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is right now. It helps more than you know. The morning had started so ordinary, it almost hurts to remember. I was 67 years old, sitting in the kitchen of the Craftsman bungalow I'd owned outright for 26 years, watching the late September sun cut through the maple leaves outside my window in Asheville, North Carolina. My second cup of coffee had gone tepid while I worked through the crossword puzzle in the Citizen Times. 42 across, 6 letters, betrayed by kin. I tapped my pencil against the paper and laughed at myself for not getting it right away. The doorbell rang at exactly 9:30. My son and his wife always arrived precisely on time when they wanted something, and 10 to 15 minutes late when they didn't. I'd stopped pretending not to notice years ago. Dad. My son walked in, carrying a brown leather portfolio I'd never seen before, the kind a banker might use. His wife trailed behind him with a foil-covered casserole dish, smiling the way she did at her dental hygiene patients, all teeth and no eyes. "Hope you're hungry. We brought breakfast." "I already ate." "Then we'll have coffee." She set the dish on my counter without asking, opened my cabinet, took down 3 of my mother's china cups. The same china my late wife had insisted we use only on Christmas and Easter. "Sit down, Dad. We have something exciting to show you." I sat. Not because I trusted them. Because I wanted to see what my son had brought in that portfolio. He spread the documents across my kitchen table, the way a magician fans out a deck of cards, with that same theatrical confidence. Closing papers from a real estate attorney down in Charleston, a quitclaim deed for the lake house up at Lake Lure, the property my wife and I had bought in 1992 and paid off using money from her teacher's pension. Loan documents from 3 different banks, a personal guarantee for a commercial line of credit with a number on it that made my coffee turn to acid in my stomach. $580,000. What is this? I kept my voice flat. I'd learned a long time ago that my son fed on emotion, his and other people's both. Opportunity, Dad. He tapped the topmost document with his index finger. "I've been working with a development group out of Charlotte. They want to put a boutique hotel on the lake property. We're talking real money, generational money." My daughter-in-law leaned across the table to refill my cup, her perfume so sweet it made my eyes water. "We just need your signature to finalize a few things. Most of it's already done." Most of it's already done. I picked up the first loan document and held it close to my reading glasses. "Tell me what you mean by that." The signature at the bottom of page 4 was mine. Not similar to mine. Mine. Every loop of the W in my last name. The way the K in my first name leaned slightly backward, like it was tired. Even the small ink bleed I'd been making with my fountain pen for 40 years, because I always pressed too hard on the downstroke. Except I had never seen this document before in my life. I picked up another. Same signature. Different bank. $110,000 borrowed against the equity of my primary residence, which I'd never used as collateral for anything, ever. Not even when my wife was dying and the medical bills were eating us alive. I didn't sign these. My son's face did something I'd seen 1,000 times when he was a teenager and got caught lying. It went still, not blank, still, like a pond when something underneath stops moving. "Dad, come on, don't do this." "Don't do what?" "Don't pretend." His wife's voice had a new edge to it now. The dental hygienist's warmth gone in a single breath. "We've been carrying you for years. Your medications, your property taxes last winter. The work on the roof. You think we don't keep track? I stared at her. I paid the property taxes myself in November. I have the receipt in the file cabinet behind you. You think you did. My son said it gently. The way you'd talk to a child who'd lost a sock. Dad, listen. Your memory hasn't been good. We've all noticed it. Mom's been gone 6 years, and you've been declining since. We didn't want to say anything, but my memory is fine. Then explain how your name is on these papers. He spread his hands, palms up, the gesture of a reasonable man being driven to extremes by an unreasonable one. Explain the casino markers in Cherokee, the credit line you opened at First Citizens last March. I had not been the Haraj Cherokee Casino in my life. I had never opened a credit line at First Citizens or any other bank in the past 15 years. I knew this with the same certainty I knew my own birthday, but I also knew, sitting there in my kitchen with my own son looking at me with practiced concern, that someone had spent a long time building a paper trail that said otherwise. Why Monday? I asked it without looking up. Why does the bank need anything by tomorrow? A small flicker crossed my daughter-in-law's face. She hadn't expected me to ask the practical question. Because the development deal closes Tuesday morning, she said too fast. If we don't have the consolidated paperwork, we lose the whole thing. The buyers walk, the banks call the loans. Everything you've worked for, gone. Everything I'd worked for. My house. My lake house. My wife's grandmother's china that her dental hygienist hands had been touching all morning. I want both of you to leave. My son's expression changed. Not to anger, to something colder. The stillness inside him surfaced now, the way a fish comes up under a frozen pond, and you see the shadow of it just under the ice. Dad, we're not leaving until you sign these. Get out of my house. He stood up, not fast. He walked around the table, slow and deliberate, and he put his hand on my arm just above the elbow, and he squeezed. I'd held that arm when he was 4 years old, and he'd reached for a hot stovetop, and I'd pulled him back, and I'd felt how small his bones were then. Now his hand was bigger than mine, and he was using it to hurt me, and the look on his face was the same look he'd had at 4 years old when he didn't get the cookie he wanted. Sign the papers, Dad. No. His wife stood up too. She walked behind me, around to the cabinet drawer where I keep my flatware. My right hand was resting on the table, holding a pen I hadn't agreed to pick up. She slid the drawer open, very calm, very controlled, and she took my wrist and laid my hand inside the drawer with my fingers curled over the lip of it. And then she shut the drawer on my hand. I have never made the sound I made in that moment. I hope I never make it again. Something in my ring finger gave way with a wet pop I felt more than heard, and the pain went up my arm into my teeth. Sign, she said, quiet as a prayer. Just sign it, Dad. Please, don't make us do this the hard way. I looked at my son. He was watching his wife crush my hand in my own kitchen drawer, and his face was completely blank. I want to tell you that I was brave. I want to tell you that I stood up and threw them both out of my house. What I actually did was breathe through my nose for 3 seconds while my hand swelled inside that drawer. And then I said, "All right, open the drawer. I'll sign." She opened it. My hand came out purple and wrong. The ring finger was bent in a direction. Fingers are not supposed to bend. My son set the pen in my left hand. Use this one. I looked at the documents on the table. I looked at my son. I looked at his wife, who was already pouring herself another cup of my coffee. I need to use the bathroom first. I'm going to be sick. He hesitated. She nodded at him, almost imperceptibly. 2 minutes, he said. Then we sign. I walked down the hall to the bathroom, closed the door, locked it, and turned on the faucet. With my left hand, I pulled my phone out of my back pocket. My right hand was useless, already going numb, the finger pointing somewhere that wasn't forward. I did not call 911. I called the number I had memorized for 31 years. A direct line into a building in Washington that most people don't know exists. The man who answered did not say hello. He said my real name, the one that wasn't on the mailbox out front. I need extraction at my Asheville residence. Domestic situation. 2 assailants. Forged federal documents. I have a broken hand and need medical. But the priority is securing the documents on my kitchen table before they leave the house. There was a pause of maybe 2 seconds. Confirmed. Asset team rolling from Charlotte field office. ETA 22 minutes. Stay on the line if you can. If you can't, leave the phone connected and somewhere it can hear. Understood. Are they armed? Not that I've seen. My son weighs 240 pounds. His wife is the dangerous one. Acknowledged. I set the phone on top of the medicine cabinet, screen down. Line still open. I flushed the toilet. I ran the faucet again. I unlocked the door. When I came back to the kitchen, my daughter-in-law had pulled out a fresh pen and a stack of Post-it flags marking every signature line. My son had moved my mother's china to the counter out of the way, like he was setting up a workspace. "Sit down, Dad," he said. I sat down. I picked up the pen with my left hand. I made a mark on the first page that was not my signature. I made it deliberately wrong. Slow. Childish. The kind of scrawl you'd see on a Christmas card from a 6-year-old. Stop. She leaned over me. What is that? Do it right. My hand is broken. I didn't look up. You'll have to be patient. You have another hand. Use the right one. I held up my right hand. The ring finger was now pointing nearly sideways. The whole hand was the color of a plum. You'll have to be more patient than that. She stood very still. I watched her think. I watched her calculate whether she could break something else and still get a clean signature. I watched her decide it wasn't worth the risk. Fine, slowly, but neatly. If it doesn't match the exemplar, the bank will reject it. The exemplar. She had an exemplar. A reference signature she'd been using to forge documents for who knew how long. What exemplar? Just sign, Dad. I wrote my name on the first signature line. Left-handed. Carefully. It looked nothing like my real signature, but it looked enough like a hurt man's signature that it might pass a casual glance. I turned the page. I started on the second one. I was on the fourth document when I heard the engines outside. Not sirens. Not a marked car. 3 black SUVs coming up my street at the speed of a controlled professional approach, doors opening before the vehicles fully stopped. My son's head came up. His wife's eyes went to the window over the sink. What is that? I don't know. I kept writing. My left hand was shaking now from the adrenaline. The Hendersons next door had been doing some renovation. She moved to the window. By the time she turned around, there were 6 men in plain clothes and tactical vests on my front porch, and my front door was being opened with the key the FBI had been holding for me for 31 years. I never had to raise my voice. The lead agent walked into my kitchen, looked at the documents on my table, looked at my hand, and said to my son and daughter-in-law, "Step away from the table, hands where I can see them, now." My son tried to speak. My daughter-in-law tried to run. She made it as far as the back door, which was being held shut from the outside by another agent I hadn't even seen come around the house. They were both in handcuffs inside of 90 seconds. She was screaming things I won't repeat about me, about the agents, about her lawyer. My son was crying, real tears this time. The first real thing I'd seen on his face all morning. "Dad, Dad, please, I can explain. Dad, you broke my hand." That was all I said. The agent in charge, a woman about 50 with steel gray hair and the patience of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before, sat with me in my living room while a paramedic splinted my finger and started an IV in my left arm for the pain. "Sir," she said, "we need to talk about who you are. They're going to find out by tonight. Your son will know by morning. You've kept it for 31 years, but it ends today." "I know." She looked at the documents her people were photographing on my kitchen table. $580,000 in fraudulent loans, a forged property transfer, identity theft, conspiracy to commit bank fraud across state lines, and aggravated assault on a federal officer. Even retired. They didn't know I was a federal officer. Doesn't matter. The statute applies regardless of their knowledge. Once we file, the FBI takes the case, not the local DA. This is going to federal court. Your son is going to do real time. Your daughter-in-law, more. Good. She looked at me a long moment. You're sure? My son held my arm while his wife broke my hand in my own kitchen drawer. He watched her do it and didn't move. He is not my son anymore. He is a defendant in a federal case, and I am a victim and a witness, and that is the only relationship we will have going forward. She nodded slowly. All right. Let's get you to the hospital. The drive to Mission Hospital took 12 minutes. The agent who drove me, a young man from the Charlotte office, didn't try to make small talk. He just drove. When we got there, I was taken in through a side entrance and seen by an orthopedic surgeon who'd been called in from his Sunday brunch. The ring finger was broken in 2 places. The middle finger had a hairline fracture. The bruising on my arm photographed beautifully for the evidence file. I spent that night at the hospital not because I needed to, but because the Bureau wanted me somewhere with controlled access while they processed my house. I lay in the bed with my hand in a fiberglass cast up to my elbow, and I thought about my son. Let me tell you about my son. His mother and I had wanted children for 9 years before we got him. 9 years of disappointment. When he was born, I sat in the hospital nursery, and I watched him sleep, and I made him a list of promises I would keep no matter what. I would never raise my voice at him. I would never hit him. I would always tell him the truth, except about my work, which I could never tell anyone, including his mother. I would love him without conditions. I kept those promises for 35 years. I should have broken the unconditional one. He was 11 when he stole $40 out of his mother's purse and lied about it for 3 weeks. He was 15 when he was caught cheating on a chemistry exam, and his mother and I went to bat for him with the principal because he swore he'd been framed. He was 19 when his college roommate's stereo went missing and turned up at a pawn shop, and we paid the roommate off and didn't ask questions. He was 26 when he met the woman who would become his wife, and she had a quality his mother and I both noticed and chose not to discuss. The quality of someone who was always slightly ahead of the conversation, like she was reading a script the rest of us hadn't been given. His mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer the spring he turned 30. She fought for 14 months. He came to visit her 4 times. 4. His wife came twice, both times with a casserole, both times leaving within 90 minutes. At the funeral, my son cried beautifully and accepted condolences from people he'd never met, and sat at the front of the church in a black suit I had paid for, and 3 weeks later, he asked me about the will. I should have known then. I think part of me did know, but you don't want to know that about your only child. You want to keep believing the story you've been telling yourself for 30 years, that he's just struggling, that he's just immature, that he'll find his footing. He found his footing. All right. He found it on my hand in my kitchen drawer. The morning after the arrest, the agent in charge came to my hospital room with coffee from a place that wasn't the cafeteria. She sat down and she opened a folder. You'll want to know what we found, she said. I nodded. Your son's gambling debt, real this time, is approximately $1.1 million. Sports books in 3 states, a high-stakes poker circuit out of Atlanta, and a credit line with people who do not file 1099 forms. His wife has been forging your signature for at least 4 years. She started small, the $2,000 credit card in your name in 2021. She built up. 6 different loans, 2 open in the last 60 days. Your lake house was already in escrow when they showed up at your door yesterday. They were not asking for your signature. They were finalizing what they'd already done. Where did she get the exemplar? The agent flipped a page. Your wife's filing cabinet. You kept old tax returns there. 60 years of them, going back to before you were married. Your daughter-in-law has been photographing them every time they visit, going back to 2019. We found the image library on her laptop. 6 years. 6 years. The cancer diagnosis was the trigger. We think she saw the medical bills coming and started planning. Your son joined her in the planning around 2022. I looked at the ceiling of my hospital room for a while. I thought about how many family dinners we'd had in those years. How many times she'd gone to the bathroom and not come back for 15 minutes. How many times my son had said, Dad, where do you keep the spare key in case there's an emergency? What's going to happen to them? He'll plead. He's already trying. His attorney called the AUSA at 6 this morning. They'll offer cooperation against her in exchange for 10 to 12 years federal, which will likely come down to 7 with good behavior. She will fight, and she will lose. We're looking at 20 to 25 for her, no parole at the federal level, plus restitution, plus the gambling people, who she also took from, will be waiting. Will I have to testify? Probably not against him, if he pleads. Definitely against her. All right. There's one more thing. The agent set down her coffee. Your real identity is going to be unsealed for the trial. 31 years of cover, gone, in front of a federal jury and the press. We can fight to keep some of it sealed. But your son and his wife are going to learn, in open court, who their father and father-in-law actually was. I thought about that for a long time. Let it all come out, I said. Every assignment, every commendation, every reason I was gone for 2 weeks at a time when he was a kid, and I told him I was at a mechanical engineering conference. Let him sit in a federal courtroom and learn that the man whose hand he held still while his wife broke it had spent 26 years working counterintelligence on the Russian desk, and another 5 running a deep-cover asset network in 3 countries he'll never be allowed to name. Let him understand exactly how much smaller he is than he thought he was. The agent didn't quite smile. Yes, sir. I came home from the hospital on Tuesday afternoon. The bureau had cleaned my kitchen. They'd left a fruit basket. The cabinet drawer that had broken my hand had been replaced. Someone, very thoughtfully, had installed a soft close drawer instead of the original. I stood in my kitchen with my cast resting on the counter, and I cried for about 10 minutes. Not for my son, for my wife, for what she would have thought as she'd lived to see this. For the fact that the boy we'd waited 9 years for had grown into a man who would let someone hurt me to pay off his sportsbook debts. My neighbor across the street, a retired math teacher I'd known for 19 years, came over with a pot of soup and didn't ask questions. She could see I didn't want to answer. She just sat with me for an hour while the soup cooled, and at the end of the hour she said, "Whatever happened, you're not alone here. You call me if you need anything, day or night." I almost told her then, about all of it, about the work, about the cover, about the man I'd actually been for 42 years before I retired to this bungalow and started doing the crossword puzzle every morning like a regular old man. I didn't tell her. I'll tell her later when the trial is over and the news cycle has moved on. She's earned the truth. The hearing stretched out over 14 months. My son took the plea. He stood in federal court in a jumpsuit the color of wheat tea, and he allocuted to every charge, and when he was asked if he had anything to say to the victim, he turned and looked at me, and he said, "Dad, I'm sorry." And I said nothing, because there was nothing to say. And the judge let the silence sit, and then the judge sentenced him to 9 years. His wife went to trial. She lost. The jury was out for 90 minutes. She got 23 years. Federal, no parole. The gambling people were, as predicted, waiting for her at the prison gate in the form of a network that did not respect institutional walls. She has, as of this telling, been stabbed twice and is in protective custody at a facility in West Virginia, and her appeals are not going well. The Lake House was untangled. The fraudulent loans were unwound by federal court order. The development group from Charlotte turned out to be 3 of her cousins running a shell company. They're all under indictment now. My primary residence was never legally encumbered because the forged liens were void from inception. I lost some money in legal fees. The Bureau covered most of it in recognition of services rendered. I sold the lake house in the spring. Too many memories of my wife there. And after everything, I couldn't look at the dock without thinking about what it had nearly cost me. The buyer was a young couple expecting their first child. I gave them the boat for free and made the wife promise me she'd teach the kid to swim before he could walk. I still live in the Craftsman bungalow. The drawer is still soft close. My ring finger doesn't bend quite right and aches when it's about to rain, which my doctor says will be permanent. I do the crossword every morning, 42 across, 6 letters, betrayed by Ken. The answer was Jodess. I got it now. If you're sitting where I was sitting 6 years ago, in a kitchen with a son who keeps showing up with a strange new friend and asking where you keep the spare key, I want you to listen to me carefully. Trust your gut. The thing inside you that goes quiet when your child walks in the room is not paranoia. It is the oldest part of your brain telling you what your love won't let you see. You do not owe anyone access to your tax returns. You do not owe anyone your signature. You do not owe anyone a second chance after the first time they put their hand on you in your own home. Family is not blood. Family is whoever sat with you for an hour with a pot of soup and didn't ask questions you weren't ready to answer. If the story meant something to you, please give the video a like and subscribe to Honey Revenge so the algorithm shows you the next one. And tell me in the comments, would you have signed the papers in that drawer, or would you have done what I did? I want to know. The story doesn't end here. There's another one waiting in the box on the left about a stepfather who thought he could outsmart a Marine. Click it. I'll see you there. I have thought about that Sunday morning more times than I can count, and the conclusion I keep arriving at is this. Nothing that happened in my kitchen was sudden. Nothing was a snap. My son did not wake up that morning a stranger to me. He had been becoming a stranger for 35 years in pieces so small I refused to add them up. The $40 from his mother's purse when he was 11. The chemistry exam at 15. The roommate's stereo. The 4 visits to his dying mother in 14 months. Each one of those moments was a small choice he made about who he was going to be, and each one of those moments was a choice I made about what I was willing to ignore. The hand in the drawer was not the beginning of anything. It was the bill coming due on a debt I had been quietly paying with my silence for 3 decades. That is the law of cause and effect, as I have come to understand it in my old age. It does not require a God to enforce it. It does not require a God to enforce it. It does not require a courtroom, though courtrooms help. It is simply this. Every choice we make plants something, and the harvest comes whether we are ready for it or not. My son's wife planted 6 years of forged signatures, and she is harvesting 23 years in a federal prison. My son planted 35 years of small dishonesties his mother and I refused to confront, and he is harvesting 9 years of his life inside concrete walls. I planted 35 years of unconditional love that I should have made conditional on basic decency, and I am harvesting a finger that will never bend right again, and an empty house I have to fill with neighbors and crossword puzzles instead of grandchildren. The harvest is not the cruelty. The harvest is the truth. What I want you to take from my story, if you take anything, is the difference between 3 things I confused for most of my life. There is the moral choice, which is to refuse to participate in someone else's lie about who they are. There is the wise choice, which is to see the lie clearly long before you are forced to. And there is the courageous choice, which is to act on what you see even when the person lying to you is the child you waited 9 years to hold. I had the moral instinct. My gut had been telling me something was wrong about my daughter-in-law since the first dinner she sat through. What I lacked was the wisdom to name what I was seeing, and the courage to act on it before it cost me a hand. You cannot love a person into being honest. You can't love a person into respecting you. You can only love them with your eyes open, and you can only protect what you love by refusing to lie to yourself about it. Trust the small voice. Lock the file cabinet. Ask the hard question at the family dinner instead of swallowing it with the second glass of wine. The people who love you will not be hurt by your honesty. The ones who are hurt by it were never the people you thought they were. That is the only inheritance worth leaving anyone. Not money. Clarity.